Hello and welcome. This is Photography Gamer and this is my new channel. Welcome. So without further ado, let's get into the first review, and this is Days Gone for the PlayStation 4. So I've had this game for about 5 weeks. I've got all the achievements, I've 100%ed the game. I've really got everything I could out of it. So this review is based on seeing pretty much everything the game has to offer. So what is the game? What is Days Gone? Days Gone, it's an apocalyptic future set in Oregon in the United States. There's been some outbreak of some virus. It's turned the majority of people into these zombie-like creatures called freakers, who are kind of like pack animals, very fast, very aggressive. There's a small amount of survivors still as well, just, trying to survive really. And that's where your character comes in, Deacon St John. Before the apocalypse, he was a biker in some kind of gang, a bit of a dubious character, but you play him in the game. He's what they call a drifter. He doesn't really live in any of the camps. He kind of goes from one camp to the next, does odd jobs, collects bounties and stuff. So he's not a classic good guy, but the whole game itself, there aren't really any good guys. Even the so-called good guys aren't really good guys. Everybody's done things that people would look at and think that's a bit suspect. There's been murders, killings, rival factions fighting against each other. It's a free-for-all. It's a mess, basically. The story is really focused around Deacon St John's, the tragedy of Deacon St John, because he has a wife, and the day the outbreak happened, he got separated from her. He assumes she's dead. Whether she is or not, as you go through the story, things will unravel. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil the story, so you can listen to this review without me completely ruining it for you, I hope. So yeah, the story is just you playing as Deacon and his relationship with Boozer, his friend, who he's trying to help through some struggles at the start of the game. It's also about the overarching story of him trying to figure out what happened to his wife and just get closure on the whole thing, really. And it's also about meeting up with other people, his other friends, his other communities, and growing friendships with them, and also trying to figure out what's going on with the virus, which includes this shadowy organization called Nero, who are kind of like peacekeepers, or sort of, in natural disasters they come in and help the community. But there's slight shady connotations to their behaviour as the story unfolds. You kind of uncover this larger web of intrigue regarding it. It's set in Oregon, so it's a pretty rural part of America. It works well for the apocalypse because it's lots of small towns separated by vast areas, so you do get this sense of isolation anyway, even if you're in that part of the world. It's not like New York or a very busy city like a London or a Hong Kong. It's countryside, it's mountains, it's rivers, it's forests, it's nature, So it's a good setting for this kind of thing because it naturally creates a sense that you're on your own most of the time. But it's full of danger, so it's an open world game, obviously, because every game now is open world because it's the law. But the open world in this game, it feels similar in some ways to others, but I think the key to creating an apocalypse, a realistic apocalypse in a game, in terms of an open world, is it's a world where you feel like you're in danger. Like for those who played State of Decay on the Xbox, when you went out in that game with one of the characters, you genuinely felt like you were at risk. You genuinely felt like there was a degree of danger. Like you could die at any moment, and this game, especially when you play it on survival mode, there's freakers, there's zombie characters, there's wolves, infected wolves, there's bears, there's infected bears, there's also this death cult who are trying to kill you. There's all sorts of different things out there in the world that are trying to take you to pieces, and the game does create that well. You do feel like whenever you're out in the wilderness, you can't relax. Not like, say, Red Dead Redemption 2, in that you can just walk around for hours and nothing's going to happen to you in general. But this game, it feels like there's constant threats, which is where the bike comes in. So Deacon's a biker, as I said. The bike becomes something in the game that other games avoid. The bike element is not necessarily original, but it creates a really nice kind of something to focus on, because in most games you disregard vehicles like they're just chewing gum. In this, the bike becomes very important because without it, you're stuck in the wilderness on foot, and that's not a good thing. And the more you invest in the bike, the more you repair it, the more you upgrade it and personalize it, the more it becomes like a rolling base, almost. It's like a tank you drive through the world. It's also a quick save location as well, so you're always aware of where the bike is and you always need to look after it. Because without it, the game would be really different and probably not as exciting, but they've really created good dynamics on the bike. The handling's good, the sounds are good, it works, it creates something you actually care about in the game rather than just dispose of everything. You need the bike really because the open world is pretty big, and you sometimes, you've got to go for missions and it's a long journey, and on that road that there's going to be things that are going to try and take you down. So you never really just bomb it down the road in a carefree way. You're always keeping a lookout at the side of the road. Is there a tripwire? Is there a sniper? Are those wolves in the distance, or is it just like a couple of freakers? And that's good. That immediately immerses you in. So that makes the open world interesting because there's constant threats. It's a varied landscape and there's lots of things in it. So I'd say the open world in this game works, and the story develops over time and it unlocks new regions in the map, obviously. And they do that in a nice, natural way. There are moments in the game where you have to make a departure from a region and you can't go back. Some gamers might find that frustrating, I want to go back to that area. At some point later in the game you will go back to it, but what it does also, in terms of gameplay and the story as well, leaving a region makes your return have more meaning. You feel like you're seeing, the old friends that you were working with in the camp, so it kind of really enforces a bond between you and some of the other characters. So, enemies. Look, this game, in terms of the enemies, the only real original enemy in the game are the hordes of freakers. Throughout the map, there's probably about 30 plus large groups of freakers. They sleep, they eat, they drink, they move around. They don't disappear unless you kill them all, obviously, but they're always there, but you don't know where. So they're kind of like the nemesis system in the Lord of the Rings game, where your nemesis is always on the map, moving around. It's like that, but there's lots of these hordes just wandering around, and it keeps it really interesting. But the rest of the enemies, the freakers are just like general zombies. They're not very bright, they see you, they run, they attack, that's it. You have the big muscly ones who are, I don't know what they're called, like bashers or something really original like that. And then you've got ones that are kind of like feral, that are a bit more dangerous, and screamers, obviously, because every zombie game has to have screamers, because it's the law. So the enemies are not original, but they look good and they definitely suit the game world. You know what? There's always something to do in this game. I played it for a long time. I played it many times and I've never got bored. Like every game session, whether it's a 5-hour epic session or just like an hour, I've always felt like there was something to do. I've always felt interested because of the element of danger, because of the variety of things you can do, because of all the different weapons and all the different approaches you can have to taking on the enemies. It never felt dull to me. I never felt like, you buy a game, you play it for 2 weeks, and then after a while, you're just like, really? I don't know if I can be bothered anymore. Like, do I really want to carry on playing this? I never felt that with this. From the beginning to the very end, I enjoyed every moment. And that's a real accolade to give the developers. They've definitely made an enjoyable game. So the overall feel of the gameplay is definitely a positive one. It does have repetitive loops. You've got to go to the camps, kill raiders, you've got to kill hordes, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And you do it all many times over, but every time it feels slightly different to the last because of the locations, because you can use the environment with all of the explosives and things. Also, you can use your enemies against each other, because the one consistent thing about this game is that all of the things in the world are trying to kill you. But on the flip side, they're all trying to kill each other as well. So if you come up against a camp and there's lots of them and you're particularly low on ammunition, and you maybe hear a horde in the distance, then you think, you can use a grenade or make a lot of noise and the horde will hear you and they will rain down on that camp and they will rip everyone to pieces. Obviously, you've got to be careful in that situation because you might get caught up in the melee, but that is a really satisfying gameplay mechanic when you use part of the game environment to your advantage like that, to take out 20 or 30 raiders. So that's a fantastic feeling. Yeah, overall, the gameplay, it's solid. It's a good feel when you're playing it. Everything feels like it's been thought through and it works. You know, graphics are something that most people really obsess over, but graphics don't make a good game. They're just nice to look at, and this game is definitely nice to look at. The game world looks beautiful. The lush forests, the lakes, the mountains, it really feels like a place, you know. It feels like they've actually looked into the region they're doing the game on. So they've researched the location because it feels organic. It doesn't feel like some guys just sat there at a desk and just, I'll put a tree here and I'll put a mountain here and I'll put a cabin here and blah blah blah. It really feels like everything makes sense. It feels like they've really thought about the narrative in terms of the environmental elements. And the graphics look good. The lighting effects are wonderful. I think the weather in this game is done really well, because most games the weather just feels a bit like wallpaper. It doesn't really feel like it matters or it makes any difference. In this game, the weather's dynamic, so you could be in a forest, you know, a lush green forest, and it starts to rain. It gets dark, it gets moody, the roads get slippery, so the bike is harder to handle, and then it might start snowing, and that was a genuine surprise. I didn't expect there to be dynamic snow for some reason. But yeah, I was taking on a base or some kind of camp, and it was taking a while. I wasn't really prepared, to be honest. I just went in blind, as sometimes you do. So I was in this trench warfare with these guys and it was snowing, and about 15 minutes later the whole place is knee deep in snow and it looked amazing. It was great. The snow really affects visibility, it really affects how your bike handles, so freakers also feel like they're tougher in the snow. I'm not really sure how that works out. That seemed a little bit confusing to me. Like, surely the cold weather wouldn't make them stronger, but I don't know. On the graphics, there is a photo mode. Obviously, being a photography gamer, I'm a photographer and a gamer, so I do like to take stills, which I put in this video as you've been watching. The camera mode is very good in this game. It's quite comprehensive and it's quite bewildering if you don't know anything about color channels and photography terminology. Could be a little like, oh dear, what is this? Confusing. There is a rookie version and a more advanced version, so you can still do nice images even if you're not an expert. So it's one of the better camera modes. The only problem with this one is when you're sweeping the camera around, it does sometimes get caught on things. It doesn't quite let you zoom out as far as you want all the time, but overall it gives you a real nice range of color management and textures and things. And so yeah, if you're a gamer and you like to take stills while you're playing, this has got the functionality for you, so don't worry about that. So that's really graphics summed up for you. The music in this game, I really love the music in this game. The actual songs they chose in general for key moments really work, but the score, you know, the actual music that accompanies the atmosphere and the tension of the game is great. Most of the time there isn't any music, so when you're out in the wilderness, it's ambient sounds, it's interactive sounds, it's gunfire, it's distant sounds of lots of things happening around you, weather, wind, the motorbike. The SFX are good and they're very kind of tactile and detailed, and especially if you're wearing good headphones, you really can kind of feel like you're there. You get a sense of three-dimensional sound around you, and the score, it's a dynamic score, so if you're just wandering in the wilds and there's nothing around you, there's no real music, only when the sun rises and sets. The music does kick in when you have hostile enemies around you, whether it's raiders, whether it's freakers or hordes, and there's different types of music for different scenarios. So if you come across a bunch of freakers, the music slowly creeps in. It's like you don't really know when it starts. It's very, very subtle, and it's very fluid and transient to the gameplay. You don't ever feel like now the music's started. You just feel like you're playing it, and the music is like a cue for you to sort of become more aware, because you're like, okay, some shit's about to go down, so let's get my gun out and be prepped, otherwise I might end up as dinner for a freaker. So there's music for freakers and also raiders, and it's really nice stuff. It's really well done and very good scoring. For me, my favourite piece of music in the game is when you encounter a horde. There's this very tense music that just kind of slowly creeps in and raises to a kind of crescendo when you get close, and it's great because when you hear that music it gives you goosebumps. You're like, okay, there's a horde here. Do I run this time, or am I feeling brave? Am I going to take them on? You know, it depends how you're feeling, but the music really gives you great cues to what's going to happen without it being heavy-handed. It's very well managed and it really accentuates the gaming experience. So the music is fantastic. I really enjoyed it, barring a couple of the songs they use, but most of the songs are absolutely fine. And the last thing is really to talk about the voice acting. The voice acting, I'd say, is very good. The main character is kind of a semi-well-known actor who's been in some TV shows. I believe he was in Dexter, and I think he was in, what was it? American Horror Story. I'm pretty sure I saw him in that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But he's very good voice acting. The dialogue's good, and you know, it takes time. It takes time to get to know the characters, and the more you do, you become familiar with them, and the voice acting is good quality, and it really helps you kind of get used to what the character is about and their personality. So the voice actors did a great job, and the script writers also did a great job, because it's not over the top. It's just, they just did it just about right. So sound and audio for this game is probably some of the best I've experienced. So very, very good. Bend Studios made this game, and for their first open world game, I tell you, they've done a good job. You know, to make an open world game must be an absolute nightmare, because there's so much to consider, and you know, the only big game they've made, they're most famous for a game called Siphon Filter, which was a 90s game which I actually owned and really enjoyed. It was kind of like a stealthy espionage shooter, so it's nice to see these guys coming back. Okay, so we're nearly wrapped up. So now it's pros and cons, or plus and minuses, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, I don't know. So good points about this game. What's good? It's an enjoyable game to play. It's got beautiful graphics, the music is great, taking on hordes is great fun, there's lots of weapons, the bike is fun to ride, the weather effects are cool, it's dangerous, it's always feeling like there's something going on. But you know, what are the negatives? It's not massively original, it does feel quite familiar in many ways. Other negatives, there are a couple of glitches I've encountered, but you know, in the amount of time I've been playing this, they're not massive problems. I can't really list many bad points about this game. I guess it's time for the verdict. What do I think? I think, should you buy this game? I think if you like open world games, if you like apocalyptic games, if you like Sons of Anarchy, if you like motorcycles, if you like zombies, if you like that kind of stuff, you will like Days Gone. I guarantee it. If you don't like all those kind of things, then don't buy this game because you're not going to enjoy it. You know, my scoring system is going to be out of 10, so obviously 10, no one is going to get 10 out of 10 because that's impossible. I'd say overall it's very well crafted in terms of story, the gameplay is enjoyable, it looks amazing, it sounds amazing. It's not original, but it has some elements that feel fresh. I'd say 8 out of 10 is a fair score. I couldn't give it less because I'd feel like I was shortchanging it, and 8 out of 10 kind of feels about right. It's not the best game you'll ever play, but it is a really good game, you know. If you're waiting for Cyberpunk or for Death Stranding or other games that are coming out and you're looking for something to keep you busy for a couple of months, this is a really, really good game. I enjoyed it. Well done to Ben Studios. And I think the user base has kind of spoken with their reviews saying that they enjoyed it. It's not for everyone, but you know, what is? So that was Days Gone. 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. Would you like to see more reviews? Did you find the video interesting or a total bunch of garbage? Whatever you guys want to say, just throw down in the comments and I'll do my best to respond to everyone. Let me know if there are any games you'd like me to review in future and I'll see what I can do. So this is Photography Gamer signing off. Thank you.